Welcome to SoundStory with Robert Jauer.
Thank you.
Bob, it's nice to meet you.
Well, glad to meet you, too.
You have quite a fascinating history, and your career we have so much to talk about. But first, let's start looking at this. You are a St. Louis guy through and through.
Yes, been here all my life.
Where did you start?
I started at Compton and Potomac. That's where I was. Well, I was born in St. Anthony's Hospital, the old St. Anthony's Hospital. But my parents lived at Compton and Potomac, right across from catty corner from Gravois Park. And we moved to St. Louis County, Afton, when I was 5 years old in kindergarten. And I grew up in Afton, went through the Afton School District. And then I went away to college for one semester, and it was bigger than I was, and I decided to come home. And I got enrolled in the junior college district. It was just starting. My student number was 62, and I needed employment, and I went to the county police department because I wanted to be a police officer. And they hired me as a part-time custodian, so I cleaned up the county police department. And while I was working in the police department, I was cleaning out the jail cells in the identification division at the headquarters building at 227 South Central, when one of the people assigned in that unit said, "Hey, Bob, come here. You want to be a policeman, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, here, read this." And in the Morning Globe was a newspaper article about the St. Louis City Police Department starting a police cadet program. It was for individuals under the age of 21 that wanted to become police officers. And they would take them and start them training and rotate through the various positions. And so I said, that's for me. And so I went and signed up, and I had no idea how many were applying. But when I finally got down to the oral interviews, there were 12 of us, and the newspaper had said they had funding for 10. And I thought, well, I got a pretty good chance. And we were interviewed by the president of the Board of Police Commissioners, H. Sam Priest, and the chief of police, Curtis Brostron, and William Thompson, who was the secretary to the board, and Ken Dames, who was the director of personnel, and a room full of people. And they came, asked you all kinds of questions, and then you left, and they said, "We'll be in touch." And lo and behold, a few days later, I got the word. I was one. And then I found out I was one of 4. They only selected 4 for the first class.
Here we have an actual clipping from the Globe Democrat.
Yes.
And Bob's the tall one.
Right, I'm the tall one.
So it went from 12 to 10 to 4.
Right. And then they did hire more as the year went on. That was probably 10 for budgeting purposes, as I figured out later.
Did you have to clean any bathrooms after that?
No, I did not. But I did clean many when I worked for the county police department.
What was it that made you want to be a police officer back then?
Well, I had started off wanting to be a coach, and then I realized basketball or some kind of athletics. And I realized that that was not going to be for me. And I just gravitated to police work. I just liked it and became interested in it. There were 2 police officers lived within a half a block of me in each direction that were police officers, and I liked them, and it just one thing led to another.
It's interesting, too, at that time that it was very competitive, which is a big change from today.
Yes, yes.
So you were a St. Louis City police officer?
St. Louis City, yes, ma'am.
And how many years did you do that?
Well, I was with the department a total of 15 years from my cadet time, and then I went probationary patrolman, police officer, and various assignments, and finished after 15 years.
I would love to get your perspective on what St. Louis was like back then, because we always tend to think that it's the worst now. Now it's the worst. But then, there were car bombings in the 80s. There were, deadly strikes in the 20s and 30s. What was it like when you were a city police officer?
Well, I guess pretty much the same. Guns were relatively unusual. It wasn't like you see on the news today, people firing guns and whatever. They were there, and it was a big deal when you found somebody with a gun, and it was absolutely illegal to carry one. There was no permission or anything like that. So I guess things seem to have gotten a little more violent, but there was always violence. I mean, we had a lot of drunk calls and peace disturbances and things like that. But I worked part-time security, secondary employment once that was approved, and I worked in a lot of businesses and teen towns and things, because people were afraid. I don't know, just people were a little more accepting, I think.
Did you have to live in the city at that time to be a city cop?
No. By that time, actually, even before I became a police officer, they had relaxed the residency requirement rules. And the two officers that lived nearby me, a half block away in each direction, they were both city police officers also. So had to live in St. Louis County, but that was no problem.
Well, I know we've got a lot to talk about because you have quite a career here, but I wanted to sort of interject at which point I got to meet your lovely bride. But when did she enter the picture?
Well, she entered the picture after I was employed at the police department, and she was a police department employee also. Her brother was a police officer, and she got a job out of high school in the public relations or public affairs, forget what the exact title was, unit. And I was a cadet assigned to personnel division. And of course I was unmarried, she was unmarried, and I was young and on the prowl. And she was a pretty blonde, and what the heck. One of my assignments at working in personnel was to help the community relations division when they gave tours. They had a program at the time offering tours of the headquarters building and the academy to youths in the St. Louis City public schools. And so those were coordinated through the public relations or public affairs department. And she was one of the people doing the coordination. So I got to meet her. And that was the beginning.
Well, it obviously seems to have worked out. How many years has it been now?
I can't count that high. It's pushing 60, 58 or 59, something like that.
That's incredible.
Yes.
And you have 3 children.
3 children.
Is Amy the oldest?
Amy is the oldest.
So
Amy
you have
Elizabeth.
Amy, Karen, and Bob Jr.
Right.
What was it like being a police officer and having children? Did it kind of change your perspective on the job at all?
Not really. I mean, I loved them, and you thought about them from time to time, but I don't think it was anything special or unique.
Yeah, I think I must watch too much Law and Order, but I know wives are always worried when their husbands are police officers.
I'm assuming she worried. I'm certain she worried. But worry was in her blood anyway. Her brother was a police officer. Her other brother was a firefighter. I mean, that was just kind of normal.
Let's talk about when the kids were little.
Okay.
You were living in the city, or you were living in Afton?
We were, by that time, we lived in the city for the first 2 years, round the corner from her mother. mother and father. She was the last one at home, so we were close by. Once she got pregnant, we were in a 3-room apartment, so we had to find more space. And we found a home in Afton, near where I had grown up, and it fit our needs, fit our budget. It was only $17,000, which is which was at the top of the budget.
Seemed a lot then.
Yes.
When you think back on those times when the kids were little and you're in your $17,000 home, what do you think about? What are some of those memories that pop into your head?
Well, basically, they're all good. We did some remodeling on the house, painting, and things I think that go through everybody's reactions when they're relatively newly married, and baby's crying, oh, what do you do? And, then the second one comes, oh, yeah, she's crying. I think it was a normal childhood or normal marriage.
Well, I know your kids are probably going to see this, so I'm going to ask when you think about Amy, what's Amy like?
Amy is very strong-minded, which is good. She's strong-willed. She is independent in her own way. She takes control when necessary, and she's a good kid.
She's a firstborn.
Firstborn, yeah, right.
And what about Karen?
Karen is a little softer touch, but she's very loving, very loving. She's going to school right now to become I don't know technically what it's called, but it's a juvenile development. And she has, not only is she going to school, she's 50-something years old, and she's going to junior college, but she's also has a full-time job as a nanny, and doing a wonderful job with the child, and coming along fine.
And then your youngest is Robert Jr.
Robert Jr. Well, like any time when you have a son and you're going to run it crosswise with him from time to time, but he is a solid, supportive person. We were just on a trip, and I became ill and had to leave the trip, and he and the oldest one, Amy, they drove 150 miles or whatever to pick me up, take me back home, and take care of us. And he's been very responsive in all ways. I think he's a good police officer.
Yeah, he followed in your footsteps.
Well, I hope so. and he's got a wonderful job with the Attorney General's office, and I think he's doing right.
And now you have a passel of grandkids and great-grandkids.
Right.
Are they a lot more fun than, when you were younger trying to bring up your own kids?
Yes. Ask your mother, talk to your father, that kind of stuff. Our baby is just, the babyest is just a few months old. We've got 2 of them that are very young. And the oldest is 6. And right behind him is the second oldest. And then we got a couple of 4 and 5-year-olds.
So when you all get together, that sounds like a big group.
It is. It's 25 or something like that with everybody.
That's really wonderful, though, to have all of that family around you.
It is. It is. I adore it. I wish we could do more together.
Well, let's go back to a little bit of Bob's career, because we talked about your years. Did you say 15 years with St. Louis Police?
Yes.
And then there was something new coming around the corner,
Right.
and you had some administrative experience that someone thought would come in handy.
Right. My last assignment in the police department was in the planning section. That was the section that wrote the special orders and the procedures and things, and coordinated activities between agencies, between the police and the rest of the world. And as one of those duties, I was the new kid on the block in that unit, was this thing called computers. Now, computers had been in the St. Louis Police Department for a couple of years. The computer center was located on the 3rd floor. Our offices in the planning section were on the 3rd floor, and everything was going along fine. Well, then they decided to create and move the computer center out of the headquarters building and make it a regional operation. So that meant that the computer center was going to literally leave the police department. It would no longer be part of the police department. It would be a separate entity called Regis, Regional Justice Information Service. And it was going to be at 1017 Olive Street, nearby. And, well, they had all of these procedural things, places to... They did all kinds of things in the computer room that they were no longer going to do because it was no longer the police department's. And as the new guy on the block, it fell to me to do the coordination activities and to plan this all out and to sort it out and route it around. And so that's what I did. I became the Regis coordinator for the St. Louis Police Department, the first one. And I drafted all kinds of orders and restructured orders. I had to rewrite them because where orders said that they were supposed to go to the computer center, they were now going to Regis. And there's just a whole lot of making the thing work, you know, the grunt work, the dirty work. The policies were all taken care of, but I did the implementation part.
By the way, I just wanted to show this photo. Here is a young Officer Jauer.
Yes.
You were probably how old here?
I was 21.
21.
That was back in the olden days.
That's a great photo. I think a lot of us today don't appreciate enough because we're so used to computers and that law enforcement agencies are all kind of hooked in together these days. But I imagine when you were first starting, things were all, you had a Rolodex and things are on paper. And how do you chase things down?
Well, when you speak of Rolodexes, we didn't have Rolodexes as such. We had file cabinets that were the drawers. They were a set of drawers, and they would move like this in a circular fashion. And arrest records were put on a 3x5 card and filed alphabetically. Stolen vehicles were put on a 3x5 card and filed numerically, and that was in the auto theft office. Arrest reports were, they had a photography process. I don't remember the exact name of it, but it filmed the top of a booking sheet. Whenever you were arrested, there was a booking sheet filled out. And it filmed the top of that booking sheet, which became a 3x5 card. And we had a whole floor at police headquarters, the 5th floor record room, filled with these card-bearer machines with 3x5 cards. And there was another office with the auto theft records with the 3x5 cards. And then when you wanted to find a license plate issue, this was right when the computer was coming in, we had books, regular like telephone books for Illinois and a couple of surrounding states, and the information in there was in license plate number order. So in a phone book, you go to an alphabetical listing and you find your name and you get your phone number. In a license plate book, they were in license plate number order, and you looked up your license plate number order, and then you found your person's name and address. in Missouri, we had books. We also had a IBM card file that the Department of Revenue would send to us, and we had those in license plate number order. So
There's a lot of paper.
a lot of paper. You had a pick-up and ring phone in the dispatcher's office, so an officer on the street would say, I want a theft and issue and a wanted check on blah, blah, blah. The dispatcher would write that down, put it in a little card conveyor belt, and would go down to an information dispatcher. The information dispatcher would have a pick-up and ring phone, and it would pick up and ring in the record room and say, I need a wanted check on blah, blah, blah. And then they would hang that up and push the button, and it would ring in the auto clerk's office. And we'd say, I need an issue on blah, blah, blah. Each one of us would go to our card files and thumb through the cards until we found what we were needing, and pick up our phone, and it would ring and say, on so-and-so's request, it's issued to, no wanted, whatever. And then they would put the little card in the conveyor belt, and it would go back to the dispatcher, and the dispatcher would say, car ABC, no wanted, no theft on your vehicle.
Wow, that's so many steps. I'm curious, too. By the way, I think your bracelet might be making some weird noises on the microphone. When you were switching over to Regis, you said computers had just come in. How big were those computers? What did they look like?
Well, they were big machines. I mean, got computers in your phone and everything now that probably, I don't know if they are or not, but they're as sophisticated as the computers we had. But they were in big rooms, and you had to have special air conditioning and ventilation for them, and, big disk drives, humongous disk drives. To get the information, big tape drives. I mean, what you have today, you probably in your telephone or your wristwatch is more powerful than what we had in the computers then.
So at that time, you went from being a police officer to kind of helping to, I guess, almost start Regis. But what was your experience to be able to do that? Were you ever just thinking, I don't know what I'm doing here?
Well, I never said that part out loud. We were all learning. I mean, there were the technicians who knew what they were doing, or knew it, as far as things went. But you knew what was wanted, and you had to figure out how to get there. And you consulted with other people that knew slightly more than you, and they would consult with people who knew slightly more than them, and they'd come back and tell you, and you'd write that down, and it's like anything else. It's hard to say, but I think you understand.
You figure your way through it.
Right.
So how long were you with Regis?
35 years. So I had a total of 50 years plus my time with the county police. So almost 51 years in law enforcement or criminal justice or whatever you want to call it. But between cleaning up the county police department and working at the city police department and 35 years with Regis, I have a little better than 50 years in criminal justice.
And what exactly, if you could, in a nutshell, summarize what Regis does or what Regis is?
Regis is the information exchange point. Regis has grown. Originally, it was like 12 departments in St. Louis County, plus the St. Louis City and County Police Departments. And then we started including a few departments in Illinois. And now, I don't know the exact number of agencies, but we've got agencies throughout Missouri, I shouldn't say throughout, but primarily in the St. Louis, Franklin County, Jefferson County, and St. Charles County area. Call that was Region 5 of the old federal funding, so that made that easy. And then in Madison, Monroe, and St. Clair County in Illinois, we have a number of agencies there also. And we covered not just law enforcement, which is where we started, but we had included corrections, like city corrections and St. Louis County corrections, and the sheriff's departments and elsewhere have jails, so they're corrections also. Prosecutor offices, St. Louis County prosecutors, St. Louis City prosecutors, both at the city court level and at the state court level. So circuit attorney, prosecuting attorney in St. Louis County, so on and so forth.
So all of those departments before this were kind of all their own separate islands operating. So how much did it change policing to have all of that connected?
Well, I think it made life a whole lot easier. I mean, the whole idea of having a regional computer center was to make information available, to make it interoperable so that if somebody was wanted for a speeding a bench warrant for speeding in St. Anne, and you were down in Afton or in Jefferson County, when you made a wanted person check on it, you found out that they were wanted in St. Anne or wherever, and you could arrest them, and have them face justice. We also linked with the Missouri State Highway Patrol, which covered the law enforcement in particular, all of Missouri, and the Missouri State Highway Patrol, and then ultimately the Illinois State Patrol, which we connected with. They would connect with the federal law enforcement system, which is NCIC, or the National Crime Information Center. So an officer in Jefferson County Sheriff's Department, for example, could do a Regis check, could find out whatever they needed to know about the St. Louis area, whether he was wanted, arrested, whatever. Check with the Missouri State Highway Patrol, including his criminal history from elsewhere in the state of Missouri, and also forward that on all electronically to NCIC in Washington, D.C., to get the national picture that he was wanted in Timbuktu, Alaska, or Hawaii for that matter. It just tied it all together. It was information exchange.
When you were a police officer, did you have any close calls or any harrowing experiences?
Well, I don't know that they were harrowing. We came up, I was on patrol one night in the Soulard area, and the sky looked orange colored. I said, that's not good. And investigated and drove over there, and there was a building was on fire. And I did run in. It wasn't that I was a superhero or anything, but I did run in, and it was smoky in the hallway, and there were flames, not necessarily right where I was, but I rescued a few people. Broke up a fight or two. I mean, nothing super heroic. I wish I could say there was, but there wasn't.
When you think about some of the fun times, anything that sticks in your mind about somebody that you helped, or maybe camaraderie on the force?
Oh, there was one lady that she lived near Soulard Market, and I helped her a couple times, and she sent me little thank you notes and stuff like that. And there I did get a few cards, and I mean really a few, like 2 or 3 over the years. But a lot of my time, my personal time in the department was spent in offices. having been a cadet, and had worked, one of my assignments was working with a area major who was in charge of patrol for districts 1, 2, 3, and 9. I got labeled as an office worker, and so I became the captain's aide in the 3rd district, and I did a lot of things in the administratively, and that led to my being selected to go into the planning section. And from there, I went to Regis. So in a way, my career got routed from police work to administration work, which was okay with me.
You said earlier that before you settled on becoming a police officer, you thought about being a coach.
Yes.
But you have coached, right?
Well, yes. I was a third-line softball coach for one of my daughter's softball teams. I mean, I was just one of the dads out there saying, run, stop.
I think those are some of the best memories that I have with my kids, though, coaching their teams, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was fun. It was enjoyable. I don't regret it at all.
But you realize that probably the line of work that you chose was wise. Yes. I enjoyed what I did. I got at Regis, one of the people on our advisory committee was Chief Jim Damos from University City, a very popular or well-known man locally, who was very active in the International Association of Chiefs of Police, IACP. And he was on the committee that I was staff support to, and he got me as an associate membership in the IACP. And so I got to attend all the IACP annual conferences, which are big events. And Regis was a member of the St. Louis Area Police Chiefs Association, and I wrote I didn't write the minutes officially. I wrote a newsletter for them, and lo and behold, many of the comments in my newsletter appeared in the minutes. So I was kind of a pseudo minute writer. So I enjoyed all of those things and the contacts with everybody. And you also served on the school board.
Yes, I was. My father had run for school board, Afton School Board, and was defeated. I had been somewhat active just as a parent in the school activities as my kids as they went through school. And I decided I would try to run for school board. I did, and I was elected first time, served a 3-year term. That was both good and bad. The district was in a lot of turmoil at the time, a long time, very well-liked person was leaving, and there was a lot of hullabaloo over the replacement. And well, I thought at the time he was okay. I don't know, but I signed up and I said I'd run for president. The board members elect the officers, so I said I would be willing to serve as president. And so they elected me president for 2 years in a row, and then I said, adios, amigos.
Enough of that. What other organizations have you been involved with over the years outside of work?
Oh, well, I was with the parent teachers organization in the Afton schools when my girls were in class there. I guess that's in the coaching assignment or task. I guess that's about it. I mean, I've supported them in their activities, but I don't think I was really involved in anything else.
So aside from your kids and grandkids and great grandkids, when Bob has some free time to do whatever he wants, or if I could just give you the day off to do whatever you wanted to do, what do you like to do?
Well, I like to go to parks. I had been a summer park employee back in my high school days, and spent 2 summers working at the park at George, can't think of the name of it now, County Park. So I enjoy going to parks. I enjoy traveling. I would travel a whole lot more. Circumstances don't always permit it, but I enjoy getting out and seeing things and meeting people, enjoy eating out, enjoy playing around on the computer a little bit.
What's your favorite trip that you've taken or country that you've visited?
Well, probably my favorite, oh geez, it's hard. My older brother was in the military. He was a second lieutenant, and he was stationed in Germany. And he met a little young Fräulein over there, and they were getting married. So my parents and I flew to Germany and did Europe in 14 days, 20 countries. Or no, it wasn't 20 countries. No, we spent a week with him touring, and then we went to England. And my highlight of my trip into England was I got to go out to the Bobby training course in London. At the time, I was a cadet, and the director of personnel had written a letter of introduction to me to a comparable person in the London Bobbies. And I got to see their training course. That was a highlight of my career. And, of course, touring Germany, and we went to Switzerland and spent some time there, and a little bit of time in Paris to see the Eiffel Tower and things like that. That was probably the greatest trips, and right behind that is our trip to Africa. I had always wanted to go to Africa, and we booked a safari through the St. Louis Zoo Association, which they're no longer doing anymore. But we went to a camping trip in Africa.
Was it maybe Kenya?
Kenya, yes. Couldn't remember the name for a moment. But it was beautiful. I have tented campgrounds that we stayed in, and a hot air balloon ride over the Serengeti Plain, and in amongst the herds of elephants and wildebeest, and it was just something that you can't imagine. You know, I mean, the closest here might be going out to Yellowstone and seeing a herd of buffalo, but that's not comparable.
That does sound amazing. I've always wanted to do that. Yeah. You know, the zoo is doing a safari park up around Spanish Lake.
Yes, I know they're going to open that, but this was a real safari.
Sure. Is there a place that you haven't traveled to that, you know, in a perfect world, if money and health and everything were not issues, that you would still love to see?
Oh, sure. Just about any place in the United States, including Alaska and Hawaii. I guess Alaska before Hawaii, but the Northeast, Great Lakes, California, portions of California. I just like to travel.
Well, I love to travel too. So it sounds like you're a curious person because you like to see things. Would you agree?
Yes.
Open to new experiences?
Open to new experiences.
Have you taken any big trips with the kids and grandkids, or do you plan to do that?
Well, you always plan. My kids are beach people, and so we've traveled with them a couple of times down to the Gulf Shore, and they're fun, but and I enjoy being with them and that, but I'm kind of beached out.
It's hot and sand gets everywhere.
Yeah, yes, it does. But I understand they've got little ones down to just a few months old, and that's not practical for them to do other places. But I've been to Washington, D.C. briefly. I'd love to go back into that area or the New York area or just about any place.
You had mentioned that, your kids and starting that family was probably the most memorable thing for you, and that you also like the holidays. So when you think back over past Thanksgivings or Christmases, what would be some of your favorite ones, and why?
Well, I guess, my favorite is Christmas because they all come to our house. We used to do Thanksgiving at our house, but now my daughter has preempted most of the family, and the others have their families to go to. But Christmas has, I guess, always been special. And the one that probably sticks out in my mind the most is when I gave the three of them a very nice cash gift, which they were not expecting, and told them it was to fund their trips with their families. It was kind of a starter. It was a reasonable sum of money, and I mean, I know they had to put more to it, but that was probably my favorite one.
That is nice. What do you think is something that maybe your children don't know about you? Because I know your kids generally tend to see a certain side of their dad or their grandpa. Is there maybe a side of you they don't know?
I'm a nice guy.
I'm sure they know that.
Well, I hope they know it. I don't know. I think I've been pretty square with them. I haven't really tried to hide anything.
Do you ever look over your family when you're all gathered for a holiday and think to yourself, I did that, the 20 plus people in that room, like you started all of that?
Right. It's a good feeling when they're all together and playing, and the little ones are playing and congenial and say, Papa, Papa, it's just good.
When you compare what things were like when you were growing up in St. Louis or in Afton compared to what your grandkids or even your great-grandkids are facing, do you think it's more complicated to be a kid today or just different?
Well, it's definitely different. And I think it's more complicated. We didn't have snow removal in Afton when I was a kid. And as a result, when it snowed, we sleigh ride down the street. And we would even go so far as to, when it started to have holes in the snow, we would get a big wash tub and scoop snow off the lawns or whatever, and go down and patch the holes in the street so we could sleigh ride. You don't sleigh ride anymore. You have to go to a park or someplace. Salt trucks are around. Now, I was only 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, and I didn't care about all of the getting around in traffic. That's all different. So I don't know. That's one big difference. And we went on bike hikes. I had a Schwinn 3-speed racer with a saddlebag. And I lived in Afton, and we'd fix some sandwiches and had our Army canteens and fill them with water. And we'd ride down to Jefferson Barracks Park or all over on our bikes, and didn't worry so much about traffic. There weren't bike trails. There weren't bike lanes on streets. But their traffic wasn't that heavy either. I mean, it was an entirely different world. And so, and there were areas around where our subdivision was in Afton where it was still woods, farmland, abandoned. We would play on the creeks. You don't want to play in the creek today. It's just a different time. I mean, my grandfather would talk about he would go hunting along the River de Pere. Well, that was before the River de Pere was stoned in, and it was woods. I have a picture of my mother. She's about 3 years old. She was born in 1910, so this would be around 1913. She's in a horse and buggy, which they had. I mean, that was part of their transportation. So it's altogether different. They would put her on the Jefferson Avenue streetcar, and somebody in my mother's family had a tavern at Broadway and Chippewa and Jefferson, where they all come together. And my grandma and grandpa, her mother and father, would go into the tavern, Ott's Tavern, and they would put her on the streetcar and tell the motorman, take care of them. And they would ride all the way to the north end of Jefferson Avenue and then turn around and ride back, and then they would come out and pick them up. You don't do that today.
Yeah, there's just one streetcar, and no one rides it. Do you have any advice that you would give to your grandkids or kids, or any sort of life lesson that has been important to you coming up?
Be open, be adaptable. Don't believe everything you hear. You got to check. Be polite. You never know who the other person is on the other side. Just be a good person. If you want to be religious, but don't be a fanatic. Everything, there's so much to learn. And I mean, just in my brief lifetime, 80 years, we've gone from, when typhoid fever was a serious problem all over, measles, mumps, all of that. Now you get the 3M shot, and bang, you're covered. It just changed so much. I've had heart valve surgery. Heart valves, now they're given different hearts put in, and have artificial hearts. And it just changed so much. Just be open to change and explore. And heck, it was a big deal when we went up in rockets. Flash Gordon was the big thing, and that was all fake. And now we've got people who've walked on the moon and whatever.
And head off to space stations.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're pretty blasé about it now.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, they're in space again. Is there anything in St. Louis that you miss from your childhood that isn't around, that maybe you wish you could show your family, but it doesn't exist anymore? Or any changes that you kind of look back and think, oh.
Well, it's been a while since I've been to the zoo. I don't think they have the chimp show anymore.
Oh, no, I don't think so.
But that was always fun to watch, the chimp show at the zoo. I'm certain there are things. Of course, the arch wasn't here when I started, but the arch is here now. So everything just changes, and it's hard to say.
Well, you've obviously loved St. Louis and the area enough to stay here your whole life.
Oh, yes.
When people talk badly about St. Louis, does it bother you, or do you understand? What are your feelings about how a lot of people who have lived here all their lives don't have the nicest things to say about it?
Well, if you don't have anything nice to say about it, then I'm sorry for you. You know, you've had a bad experience, and sorry, but, you know, it's not all bad. There is plenty of bad, yes. Always was, you know. Before we started this, you talked about some of the gangsters and things that were around in the olden days. Well, they're not here now, but we got new gangsters.
Different gangs.
Different gangs. It all changes, you know. I don't know how to answer it any differently.
Well, Bob, before we wrap up, is there anything on Bob's bucket list that you haven't gotten to yet that you're really looking forward to?
Well, there's lots of things I would like to do. I don't know that there's anything that I would say, I've absolutely got to do this. No, I enjoy travel. I wish we could travel more. I would like to take the kids on travel and expose them to things. Part of them I could, potentially. Part of them, they're way too young, you know. The others are already kind of set in their ways. One's a senior in college, and another one started in college, and one's active in politics. And, you know, I just wish the best for them. For whatever comes their way, they take and do good.
Well, you have a wonderful career and clearly a wonderful family, so a life to be very proud of.
Thank you.
It was really nice to meet you, Bob.
It was nice meeting you. Heard you a long time.